welcome to the fourth discussion of a suitable discussion. Today we'll be discussing part four, and something that Diksha and I were just discussing right before going live was how much or what we want to talk about part four. Because yeah, let's just kick it off just to give you a small idea of what part four is generally going to be about. Personally, I found it a little bland compared to the first three parts because in terms of building the plot, it isn't doing a lot, right? It's just going. So just to summarize it a bit, we have the introduction of a new character, Harish, who's a really smart guy, English lit grad from Stephens, who has a shoe factory based out of Kanpur. Go Kanpur. But
Kanpur with a C.
of course, Kanpur with a C, but still it's Kanpur. Doesn't change much, but sure. And he's in Brahmpur and he's meeting Kedarnath for a business this thing, and we see both of them going down through let's say the, how do I put it in a polite way, or like what is the word for it? Maybe the slums of Brahmpur in that sense. Like he goes to meet the shoemakers, and he goes to the area where the leather is being processed, and he has placed an order for those shoes. And yeah, there isn't much in terms of story progression happening, although we do see some form of I don't know, character cohesion being drawn, wherein you have some characters coming together. Well, one of the cutest bit I found, I think, in the part was Mr. Durrani and this one, Bhaskar's entire thing
10
about
raised
how,
to 10, the word for 10 raised to 4 and 10 raised to
Yeah. So as we've seen earlier, Bhaskar, Kedarnath's son, is like this it's math prodigy, and Mr. Durrani is Kabir's father, who is also a math professor. So that bit was really interesting for me because we see that, how the entire bit from when Mr. Durrani find out about Bhaskar, you just find it out from a couple of drunk people. One of them just says like, "Oh, you're a math professor. I really must introduce you to this person." And the introduction scene, right, when like Bhaskar meets Mr. Durrani, because Mr. Durrani is what, I think 50, 60, like his old man, and Bhaskar's 10, and they're just like very awkward around each other. And we don't really see how they interact, but we do see like the summation of the interaction. Yeah, the Mausamis and everything. And clearly both of them have a very good time at it. So I think that's I think that would be a fun area to see where it goes. I mean, how the entire equation develops along those lines. But, and yeah, I think we also see this one interesting bit where Pran is at a party where he meets Harish, right? We do see him talking to Harish and trying to find out if he's interested in someone or not, because he thinks Harish would be a really good match for Lata. And he's told that, Harish is in love with someone he met at college. And we also hear from Harish's point of view that, he is actually in love with that person. He carries her photo in a silver frame. But the end of the part kind of sets the tone really well, where he sees Lata for the first time when she's leaving Brahmpur and everything. And there's no interaction, but I think that's also although very honestly, I'm not very it's probably like the romantic in me who wants the Kabir Lata thing to work out much more than, say, the Harish Lata angle that is to be explored.
What's more romantic than a love triangle, right? Because that's where we seem to be heading toward.
But that's the thing. I don't know if I really, if Harish fits into that fantasy, I would have like whether.
Do you see, okay, before we get into that, do you see the Lata and Kabir chapter completely closed, or do you see it merely having been paused for a while?
I think I see it as a pause. Obviously as a pause, because
the fact that Mr. Durrani was introduced and kept in this chapter makes me feel like he's definitely going to come back, right?
Yeah.
Even though that goodbye was pretty final, I think we see, just because Mr. Durrani was mentioned in this chapter, I think like it's not completely over.
Right. Yeah, and plus I think it just, okay, here is where I think of it very blindly, right? If you just you have a 1500 page book where you spend the first 150, 200 pages developing a love story, you don't really develop it only for that bit, right?
Yeah.
Especially the thing that we see with certain depth being assigned to Kabir in the previous part about how he looks at life, and some backdrop into him and how he's the kind of story that develops. I don't know. I'm not really sold on the idea that it's over. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a lot more that's going to come into Lata's life in terms of suitors, but I don't really think Kabir's like out of the running for sure. But I know I'm quite okay, not uncomfortable, but not really fond of the idea of Harish and Lata ending
Oh,
up together. And I know I'm not very sold on the idea of them being a perfect match in that sense. From whatever I know,
interesting.
yeah,
So, okay, let's get into the Lata and Kabir, Lata and Harish part, and then I will tell you what my first impression of the chapter was. So, Lata and Harish, to me, Harish just seems like a much older character. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just me as a reader, but I just can't understand how old these characters are and like where they stand. Because, yeah, for me, Lata is this college going girl, and that could be what, 18, 19. I
hmm,
understand Man is the younger brother of Pran, and Harish has to be around Pran's age. So, like,
right,
he must be in his 30s. And, like, no judgment at all, but just somehow when you're building that story, the way Harish is described, his thought process, that's what basically entirely part 4 is about,
right.
seems so much more older than Lata's. So, for me, I don't know. It just feels it would be a very unflattering match. And it's especially because Lata is not described as a person who's, mature beyond her years or anything like that.
Right,
Also, like she seems like a fairly smart college going girl. Like there isn't anything to
right,
suggest
right.
otherwise. So to me,
And
that was something that just didn't fit very well. And
like,
also,
okay,
sorry,
sure.
one last thing. Also, when Harish is sort of introduced, he there's some kind of like interest he shows in Veena, who's Kedarnath's wife. Like not interest, but he does notice her features, and she notices his, and there's like a little bit of
Yeah,
interest from both sides. And to me, someone who's obviously finding someone who's a 7-year-old, 9-year-old's mother interesting probably might be a little old for Lata. I don't know. So there's something
okay.
strange in that whole equation, is what I'm feeling.
Okay, so a couple of things. First, he's definitely way older than Lata because just going by that anecdotal thing, right? You see him having a reunion with his Stephenske friends, which is at the very least 5 or 6 years after he graduates. Like that's built
Yeah,
into it because he's shown to have gone to the UK to study and everything, right?
exactly.
So obviously he's graduated at least 3, 4 years ago. So
For sure.
at the very least, right? So I mean, there that age gap right away just jumps into it. As for the second thing, I get what you're, I know, getting at, but with Man and the Saida Bai angle, we've already seen like clearly age
Age
isn't
is
going to
not
be a huge factor into how equations are determined. So yeah, I think that is the thing. Something that started becoming more real for me in this part was that clearly this book is not just going to be about romance because you start seeing far more like it started from the previous part, but now you have a more strict communal and caste based
yeah.
elements that are being like explored. That entire idea about the temple and how it was torn down by Muslims, and then how like there's this Hindu revivalism happening, and then clearly like I mean there are
A
tiny
lot
elements
about
and
the partition as well,
right,
because we hear about Kedarnath and his
right,
story and so on. And I remember this is something we pointed out in part 1 where we were surprised that nothing has been coming up about the communal tensions back
right,
in 1950s and so on, which
right,
is really nice because now I think the setup of the book seems more true to like the ages it's based on, and you completely
right,
understand where people are coming from and so on.
right.
So
And
yeah, that's
And for me, the caste-based element was also very unique, like when because they particularly go to an area which is occupied by people of the lower caste, and we it's a very interesting thing because people often dismiss caste as one as this uh, very broad thing that they can understand, but here we see a very subtle element of caste coming into play, wherein within a caste as well, there's like a hierarchy that is to be
yeah.
that follows like this pattern of discrimination or respect or whatever that's given. And yeah, that's clearly going to be a problem going forward. Like there is a strike happening, you see some political elements to it, and you see that obviously it's not so you don't really have a political family to that extent because like there are like some clashes amongst the family, amongst the politicians involved, like how Kedarnath is really respectful of the home minister, and the home minister is the one who's helping him out, even though his family in that his sister's family in that
Father-in-law,
sense
right.
are like not really fond of the home minister, right?
Mm.
And and the entire element how they describe the shoe trade is also a very curious thing, because it's not really adding anything to the story apart from just creating a depth to the market, right? I mean,
Yeah,
as to how the market functions is not really something that is adding a lot to my experience of the book.
experience as a reader, right?
Yeah, it's just something, I don't know. I just treated it as a smoking gun, like, something that will definitely kind of create an issue later on, maybe, I don't know. And that is
Mm.
why I need to know it. But,
But
but
also by this point, it's been mentioned a few too many times. I think each part where Kedarnath has been mentioned, there has been something about how complicated the system of credit is in the Brahmapur
right,
shoe market. And I mean, I understand that potentially because there was a hint of like creditors coming after him and so on in this part as well. So I understand that would probably be something that would come up. But do we really need to know this much? Is it elevating your experience too much? I don't think so.
right.
So yeah, I this chapter had a lot of things where I felt like I should be paying. You know, when you're studying a course book and there are certain lines that pop out and you're like, okay, I should be paying attention because this might come in the exam, but it there's no interest to me.
Right.
That's what like this chapter felt like to me a lot.
Another, I think another interesting bit in the part was where they discussed politics after getting drunk. And it was
Yeah,
I know how authentic it is, but it just seemed like a very fun insight into the politics of that time, where
that's
you had like, obviously, even it was just 1950s, you already had like a pro-Nehru, anti-Nehru camp. You had like this entire person going, oh, Nehru's a PM because Gandhi likes him. Otherwise, he wouldn't
yeah.
have been PM. He just keeps talking. He has all these big words. But,
And about his
but
speeches, jokes about Nehru speeches, which I mean,
yeah.
I get it.
No, I get it too, but something that really stood out for me was that, oh, okay, that speech was iconic from the time it happened, not that it
Yeah.
developed over ages, that people were just
Mhm.
awestruck. Like, so obviously the impact of the speech, whether it's for a fun, like as a joke or as like a genuinely inspiring moment, the
Yeah,
impact was visible right away. So that was a very interesting, I don't know,
yeah.
element to
So
explore.
exactly. And the more, I think the deeper we're getting into this book, the more I'm realizing it's really not about the characters, like you mentioned. It's not a love story. It's not about finding the right person for the character you're reading about. But we're just getting to know more and more about the city, right? Like it feels like one of those movies which is set in a city, or like The Wire or something, right? Where each
Right,
season or each part in this case is telling you about different people and how their lives are sort of intricated together. And
right,
that's what this part to me was a lot about, because we had a call back to Mr. Durrani and the whole Lata and Kabir situation because they met. Then
right,
the fact that Kedarnath was mentioned, a little bit of Man. So this chapter sort of brought out all the people who I thought were main characters, but the story
right,
wasn't about them. But we knew something's happening in the background. They're still mentioned.
right,
Their lives are progressing, because there's this little bit call out of how Pran thinks Lata's not doing completely fine. So you know it's happening simultaneously as the previous
right,
part.
right.
So a bit of a filler chapter, I would think, but it definitely made you, yeah, know more about the city, know more about the people that are in it, and so on. So
Right.
it's
And
like the
and
the
it's
Avengers movie that came before the final one.
okay. So, but something that was again, I like these smaller filler things wherein when Kabir is introduced in this part. Uh, I think I forgot who was noticing him. What did Harish notice him, or
With
did
Harish,
Kedarnath?
when he went
Harish
to
noticed
drop
him.
out,
Right.
yeah,
So
drop
Harish
Master.
notices that he's troubled a bit, like there is something that's bothering him, right? Like, and I think that was a nice element to add, I guess. I mean, it was not something that I was expecting, or not that it was different from what it might have been. It just okay, like it just like as you said, it adds that continuity, makes it a filler. But it's very interesting to look at how, and I think it's going to expand beyond the city, because obviously Lata is going to Calcutta, Harish is from Delhi and has something
Yeah,
to do with Kanpur. Uh, and till now we've been focusing on Brahmpur, but I'm sure now that given a lot of major characters are in Calcutta, uh, Calcutta is also going to play a major role in the city. And I think in that sense, it's a now I kind of get why it's described as, one of those generational books, because I think it's going beyond, or is going to go beyond what your conventional story is, right? Like it's just going to go beyond your love stories and everything, and describe this world that India was in 1950, right? Like the country India was, that how were things functioning, how were people behaving with each other and stuff like that. And I don't know, like again, I just felt the society was way cosmopolitan than I would have expected it
But
to be.
we're also reading about like some of the most privileged people in the society back then. So
Sure, but then um I know, and we're also reading about a very specific section. We're reading about shop owners and academicians. That's
yeah.
largely and politicians, of course, but like that's largely the area. What was surprising for me was there was a complete absence of any reference to Saidabai, and just a very
Okay.
veiled reference.
I want to talk about that. Okay. So in the last live we did, and I think what both of us were expecting was, okay, the chapters have been jumping between Lata and Man, right? So we pretty much assumed that this chapter would be about Man and Saida Bai and everything. And when you start off the chapter, the first paragraph basically speaks about how the chapter is going to be about Man and Saida Bai. And then there's this random guy. So for the first few pages as I was turning over, I was just waiting when Harish sort of meets Man or when he crosses paths with Saida Bai. Like the way this chapter started just made me very confused as to why am I reading about this person out of nowhere, right? And the
Right,
whole continuity part that we spoke about only came in later, where you realize, okay, this is already happening in the background and so on.
right, right,
So for me, the construction or the structure of this chapter was a little confusing
right.
as to why I'm learning about this new person. Also, I said it, I think two parts ago, that I don't want any new characters, and then we had Kabir, and now we have Harish. So clearly, that's
I think
not
I
true.
think that ship has sailed. I really don't think we're gonna. These are the only characters that we're dealing with. There are
Yeah.
definitely going to be a lot more introduction to like other characters. And like in
Hmm.
that way, a very mini spoiler that I also came across was that people were tweeting about how they love the Chatterjees, right? And we haven't
Yeah,
even
but that we
yeah,
expected would happen.
yeah. So like those are expected entrants. Harish was obviously like Harish, and it's not that Harish is the only character that's introduced, right? Because you introduce a character, you're bound to like introduce a couple of like filler or like just the
Around
sidey
him.
character. Like he had this friend who was also in Brahmpur, and like this I forgot
Sunil.
his name. Huh?
Sunil.
Sunil Patwardhan. Correct. Right. So I mean, you have like it's not just one character that's going to come in, but yeah, and I think it's going to be a challenge, right? Like personally, overall, as a very bland assessment of this chapter, I'm not very sold on it. But
Hmm.
I'm not writing it off because it might be just something that's building up towards something else. But as a reader, I think I don't know. After a point of time, you really don't want to get a lot into newer characters because a lot of the reading experience does come from like developing certain form of
Stories, like
equations.
seeing
Yes.
their journey, right?
Yeah, so like I mean, I would much rather get into the depth of like a few characters per journey rather than having more journeys from more people. But I know, let's hope
Yeah. And I'm
like it.
like, for me, this chapter, like, I did not need to know about the tanneries in Brahmapur or how the shoe business works. Like,
Right,
just it told me a little about Harish, where you understand that he cares a lot about his work, etc. But that kept on being pushed and pushed and pushed, and it was just not necessary. Like, there were like full scenes that didn't need to happen, certain exchanges that did
right,
nothing for me to know more about him. Or I
right.
hope they called out later, because I feel like right now they were of no use for sure.
No, I think that just builds up into that other aspect that we're talking about, that it's going to go beyond that search for a suitable boy for Lata. It's going to talk about, I know, the caste elements or the communal elements that existed in India back then. Because uh I mean you saw in very weird ways how things were playing out, right? Like when he goes to visit the shoemaker's workshop and he sits, so it's not exactly a caste element which we see like the one which I want to talk about, where he sits on one of their equipments and everyone just kind of has a
Get
surprised look
offended.
on their faces. Yeah, because they treat it as something that they sometimes even worship to before they start work. But the other subtle element that I kind of think I missed out on, I know, while reading, and this is something that came to me later, was the fact that no one spoke out against it. Everyone was just offended, but like no one could speak out, and that's a reflection of those, that caste-based dynamics, I guess, that you really can't say anything back to the person. And yeah, I think that just kind of very weirdly builds towards a, I know, so there is trouble brewing there, I guess, in Brahmpur, and that's going to somehow or the other play out, right? Because you have a revenue minister trying to push through a secular bill of, revolutionizing land holding in that sense.
Yeah.
Land holding that is going to be, I mean, I know it appears to be a classic recipe for this, political drama, like someone's going to exploit someone for like something else. So yeah, I think that's that. But yeah, I kind of missed like Mrs. Rupa Mehra in this chapter. I don't know. I really wanted like it just kind of added a lot more to the story. I really enjoyed reading parts about
Did
her.
it feel like you're reading some other book, like a different genre, or like did it
Yeah,
not feel like a
yeah,
part of the book
yeah.
we've been reading?
Yep. Definitely, for sure. Like I think reading this was just like okay, very up. Like I could imagine myself reading the first three like parts in one sitting and then just going, oh, okay, like not stopping, and then like at the end of part 4, I would have to stop because things just didn't like
It just
sit
didn't
well,
fit.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same, similar
yeah,
feeling. So, and I'm quite shocked I feel this way because for me, my favorite characters till now have been like Kedarnath and Pran, and like I really like Haresh's character also because I think like first of all he seems the most relatable to me as a person out of all of these people,
really.
which is an issue in itself, and we can discuss that like not on this live. But yeah, so for me these are like three of the characters which are seeming like people I really like, or I can like understand them a little bit, where their motivations lie, what they are as people, and so on. But it was just, it lacked, I think, the dramatics of Mrs. Rupa Mehra and Meenakshi, or like Man or Saida Bai. I think maybe that's what it is.
I think yes, prima facie that for sure. But I think one thing that it also lacked was even although it talked a lot about these three characters, right? Okay, not Pran as much as Kedarnath and Haresh, but okay, if I take Haresh out of the equation because Haresh was a new character introduced, so there was a lot of depth, like not a lot of depth, but we learn a lot about him. We aren't particularly learning new depths about Kedarnath or Pran in this chapter. Like, even though they do a lot of things, they're just like regular things. Okay, someone's come to my shop, I have to take them around to, kind of gain some business. That's what Kedarnath's doing. Pran's just going to a party he was invited to and just has like a couple of normal interaction and he's trying to kind of find someone for Lata. But you don't see like an insight into how they're thinking or what
Right.
exactly is their motivation behind these things, etc. It's just like normal thoughts. So yeah, like that's why I guess I mean you wouldn't have found if you like those characters, you won't really find anything about them
It's as
to this thing. But
engaging, right? Like for me,
right,
the one person I learned a little more about, even that also very little, was a bit about Veena, where we finally
mm-hmm.
got to see Veena as a person who, like, her thoughts as opposed to what people think of her and what people are saying about her and how she's a mother and a wife and so on. So maybe a little bit about Veena where you understand like she's a little sarcastic, she's fairly like more liberal in her thinking than her in-laws are and so on. How much
Right.
she understands her child and she understands he might possibly be a prodigy and so on. So those kind of things which I really liked because I did not expect that. I did not think Veena would be even a character we would get too much into. So
Right.
I like that part of this thing. But you're right. For me,
Uh-huh.
it just didn't feel like I was reading a suitable boy. It just felt like a different book completely.
Yeah. Okay, quick question. Do you think Veena Haresh is something brewing there, or that was just like this passing this thing? Or do you think
I
that's
don't
going
think
to be a
anything's gonna happen.
thing later? Yeah.
No, I don't think it's gonna be a thing later, and I really like that because, like to me, right? Like we think this book is set in the 1950s, but it's so much more liberal and so much more cosmopolitan, like you said, than like the 1950s, and you don't expect people to like uh, be admiring each other's wives, and that's something I think people do all the time anyway, but no one's vocal about it. We don't read that in books and
Right.
so on. All he said was like
Right.
Veena seemed interesting and had good features or whatever, right? And I really hope nothing gets into that because that just shows you that Haresh is this guy who notices people around him. He obviously did a
Uh,
course in shoes and so on, so he maybe cares a little more about those. I don't want to use the superficial, but like the physicality of people and so on, because everywhere that's what he's noticing, right? So I hope this is
Right.
just a call out to how Haresh is as a character. If it develops into something, I don't know, I would not be a happy reader. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so again, the entire bit that we keep circling back to, right, about how this seems far more cosmopolitan than you would expect. And that I think is just a reflective of how I know how less we knew of India back then. Obviously, that we haven't, right? Because you always tend to read of the negative bits and not like what you always read of the negative bits, or actually you just read of the revolutionary bits, something really good,
True.
something really bad, like the changes that are happening around that time. Because that era or that period was defined by changes.
Yeah.
But for people living through it, it's the same way you discuss a bill in parliament that's being passed right now, right? Like for you, right, it's a change. It takes time to see that change. But for you, normal life is not about that.
Yeah.
But right, but the entire Harish Veena bit, I know, it just felt, I know, I got a hint from the chapter that Veena is not a very happy
Hmm.
wife in that sense. She's not very happy with her marriage, right? And I'm not like, again, I'm not a huge fan of this turning into something, Harish and Veena turning into something, but it just, uh, that I just found this very interesting about how Veena is not particularly happy about things,
Yeah.
and
She seems like a wife, but not necessarily someone who's extremely happy or excited about where she is. Like, it's a sharp
yeah.
contrast from like a Savita, right? Who seems actually really in awe of her husband and is
Yeah, and
very
she's
happy with
enjoying
her
her
marriage.
marriage and everything.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think, but that's also like a honeymoon phase of your like
New.
extended honeymoon phase or whatever of your marriage, opposed to like I know raising a kid. And
Totally.
right, and I think even we also see this very subtle line by Kedarnath, right, where he talks about how he loses his wife to his son's mother.
Hmm.
And I think that kind of becomes I think that would be a very interesting element to see how it plays out, because clearly they have a prodigal son, not a prodigal son, a son who's a
Prodigy.
prodigy. Yeah,
Yeah.
but and yeah, and I found really Bhaskar, I know, like a very exciting character, because I don't know, like I think all of us can relate back to that memory of just finding something I know, not unique, but something like which other people are not really interested in, like
Yeah.
something and supremely interesting, some and which unfortunately for this guy is math, which absolutely no one's going to around him is going to be too much into. But yeah, he seems like super fascinated by this idea, and I think it's a very subtle call out, or it might be me just reading way too much into or expecting too much from a book, wherein he talks about this law of fourths, right? Where like you have a word for 10, 100,000, but nothing for 10,000.
Yeah.
Like maybe there are like there are some equations or some kind of things in your life which you can't really describe or like fit within something, but they are at the end of it a part of something. It's probably me reading too much into the book, but
Pro-
yeah, like that's something that I know, like it just felt like I mean, wouldn't it be smarter writing to just like not get into it at all? Like if it wasn't something I was building up to or something, you just
True. I mean,
possible, right? I know.
probably, but it also does make Bhaskar endearing that he finds these things which are pretty normal. All of us know how what 10 raised to 10 is and 10 raised to what 10 raised to 1 is 10 raised to 2 is and so on. But the fact that none of us thought of it that way and he did, I think that just adds to Bhaskar's character more than it probably alludes to something more. I don't know.
Fair enough. Fair
Depends.
enough.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, right, I think I'm really looking forward to like the Bhaskar and Mr. Durrani thing developing, because I found that to be a very cute thing, that you have this old man who's also slightly not very who takes time to
Affectionate,
process things. Like,
warm.
yeah, affectionate is, I don't know much about the affectionate bit because there isn't a lot of context. But clearly, like the couple of occasions when he's spoken to, like, when he speaks to Mr. Patwardhan, he just randomly shows up at his door and he's clearly awkward around younger people. Or when, like, the first time Harish brings Bhaskar over, he's very awkward. Like, the entire scene's awkward. He's not very comfortable around a lot of new people and is just, but, and we also don't know what it transpires in that hour between them, but you
Yeah.
clearly know they had a lot of fun, like, with Mossumis and triangles and God knows what. And yeah, but I just find the idea very endearing for both parties, like for Mr. Durrani to have found someone who's like, a young
Unlike
prodigy who
his
he
son
can take.
interested in maths, basically.
Yeah. And for Bhaskar as well, right? Like, because I think uh it's one of those cliched memories people can have, right? You know, this young like as a child you have a dadu type person in your
Yeah.
life who's really interested in what you're doing. And like
Hmm.
till now, because none of his actual grandparents have shown it, or like people in his life apart from Man, I think have shown any
Yeah.
interest in his love for math, or like even like promoting it or helping him out with it. But now we have a character who's, is seemingly might be interested in this entire bit.
So let me get this right. You have a part describing a completely new person who could potentially be the love interest of one of our main characters, and your takeaway was a child and an old man's 1 hour equation that we did not even read about. I think that really sums how we feel about this chapter.
True, I guess, yeah. I think that's actually, oh damn, I never thought of it that way. But yeah, that's really what this part was. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
I was too so, and that also reflects on how much I'm not sold on Naresh as a suitable candidate for Lata.
Also,
So,
I'm Team Harish, I think.
hmm.
Actually, no, I really liked Kabir also. But
Yeah,
I'm really liking
you know
Harish
your
as a
team,
character.
Kabir. You know,
No, I'm
as of
really
now, your
liking
team,
Harish as
Kabir.
a character. No. I'm really liking Harish as a character. I think he's one of the smarter, entrepreneurial, young, differently thinking, not
Kabir,
completely.
Kabir can be that way. Kabir's like
Maybe.
smart
Kabir's too
and like and
young. Kabir's too
everything.
young for me to have that
Yeah,
opinion of him, maybe.
but yeah, he's like Lata's age. It's fine. Like I think more
Yeah.
I don't know. It's compatibility and stuff. Like
It
I'm
for
still Team
me
Kabir.
with Kabir, I didn't learn too much about Kabir. I learned more about Kabir and his equation with Lata and how he
Right.
feels about her and so on. But I
That's
think
fair.
as Kabir's character developed, I don't think they're on equal footing basically. Like I know a lot more about Harish and how he thinks and so on versus like I wouldn't know why Kabir broke up or didn't break up and like why that breakup happened the way it did. Like it didn't make
Hmm.
sense to me too much. And his intentions also didn't seem very clear because I didn't know enough about his character till then.
Right.
So I don't think they're on equal footing. For now, I'm Team Harish for sure.
Yeah, but that's also because we haven't had a just a Kabir chapter till
Kabir
now, right?
chapter, correct.
Right. We've always had Kabir as like in Lata's life, not like Kabir in his life.
Which I think which is interesting, right? Because that really shows you that while Kabir was introduced right in part one, the fact that we never learned about him, but now learned about someone who's possibly going to be a competitor to him.
Hmm.
We got a chapter about him. Maybe shows you where the author is also headed.
I don't know. I'm kind of expecting. I don't know. It's probably dramatic. Me like there's going to be obvious. I personally think there's going to be another Lata Kabir meeting for sure. And like I think in the lead up to that meet, there would definitely be a lot more depth to what Kabir does or says. So I was
So
hoping.
basically, as we end this, we understand that Lata and her mom, Mrs. Rupa Mehra, are headed towards Calcutta. So we know Arun and Meenakshi are going to come back. We know that Harish is headed back to Kanpur.
Hmm.
Or Delhi. Kanpur, I think
Delhi,
he said
Delhi,
that.
Delhi, Delhi,
He
Delhi,
said
Delhi.
back to Delhi.
Hmm.
Okay, so he's gone. Everyone else stays here. And we don't have an update on Maan and Saida Bai yet. So we don't know
Yeah,
what's happening.
I think I'm very disappointed on that front. Like I that was something that was really just like waiting to explode into something really interesting and has just fizzled out in the past two. This
I hate that everyone in the last two chapters have mentioned that something is happening, but no
yeah,
one
but
has mentioned it with any form of questioning why it's happening, or I don't want to use the word disgust, but even shocked about the fact that this is
or
happening.
details for that matter, or just details. Like there's nothing there. It's like everyone knows that Man and Saidabai have a thing going on, including Pran's friends. Like when he's chilling with them, they bring it up. But there's just like no. Okay, what are people looking at it as, and how are people reacting? Nothing. It's just kind of
Yep.
ruining it
So,
for me.
no, I think that's where we're at towards the end of the chapter. Not sure why we had this chapter, but we know
Yeah.
everyone's leaving, and we're gonna probably say bye to Brahmpur for a
Yes.
bit, unless we
Yes.
have a man chapter.
Or like I know back to I think we might have a Brahmo chapter when we explore something about uh basically I think you see the temple thing being a huge issue coming up. Obviously
Really?
it's yeah. Obviously it's clearly it's right there. Like it's building up into something. You have
The
you see
strike, the
yeah
temple, the
yeah
bill.
Yeah, I mean it's right. It's filled with political potential. I mean I can see why this is going to happen. I mean you see that one of those people he talks about how he finds the idea funny that he's going to have a temple in position in such a way that Muslims have to bow in front of the
Yeah.
temple to I mean come on, that's and you see like those flags being put up in that area, and like it's just building up towards something. It is set in a time where it is good. It's like it's far easier for communal
Yeah.
right to break out as opposed to now. So I don't know. So yeah, I think Brahmpur is not as much out of the picture as we would like to think. But yeah, definitely like losing Sheen to other places for sure. Like Calcutta, I think is going to be the next ground of action.
Which I'm so excited. Like as much as I want to know about Man and Sairabai, I'm really excited to know Chatterjee's. Just from that one dialogue when Varun very sarcastically said, "After all, we are family," or something, which apparently the Chatterjees say a lot. Just really, like, basically, I want drama now. Like, I don't want political drama. I want family drama and love interest drama because that's what I signed up for. That's how
And
I'm
I
feeling.
think personally it's going to be brilliant because you have a young Lata who's okay, like by all measures and standard, like this you proper North Indian Punjabi, like who's been living in Brahmpur, and suddenly she's going to be in Calcutta, which is a very different experience. Again, I've never been to Calcutta as such, like in transit, sure, but from whatever I've read of it and heard of it, it's going to be a different experience for sure,
Yep, for
and
sure.
it's going to be really interesting to look at it from Lata's perspective.
Yep.
Cool.
I
So I
think,
think we'll end it here, right?
yep.
Okay, that's what we have for you guys. Do tune in next week. I think we'll be having a live around the same time. We'll be informing you. We'll be discussing part 5. I think we might end up doing part 6. Diksha and I'll like discuss this later sometime and have a take a call on this, and we'll obviously be
I have,
informing you of it.
yeah. This week I
Mhm.
will have a lot of time to get to Patsy.
Yes, yes. Okay, so thank you for tuning in. Do let us know your feedback. This live is going to be posted on IGTV as well. So, you think? Okay, bye-bye. Bye.
Hope all of you loved that episode. If you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel and our podcast. Please tell us how you like this podcast through the comment section below. We'll be back with another amazing episode of the Kitabi Karwan podcast. Thank you for listening.